media team could all take your seats now. First, to welcome each and every one of you for finding time to join us on this last day of our event, put together by IRSK, COMESA, and Accord. The last 2 days have been amazing, and I believe it will be very useful for benchmarking our future events based on the kind of knowledge that we churned out and the quality of our deliberations. So again, a big welcome to each one of you. A quick recap on yesterday. An amazing day of discussions, deliberations, speeches, and panel discussions. We started with a couple of speeches, which ran into a panel discussion on the question of women in diplomacy and international affairs. For this session, we had the honor and privilege to host Ambassador Rose McKenna, the permanent representative, Permanent Mission of Kenya to United Nations Office at Nairobi. We also had the privilege of having with us Engineer Mwende Njiraini, Africa Initiatives Coordinator, Diplo Foundation. An amazing lady by the name Ms. Caroline Vicini, Ambassador of Sweden to Kenya, also graced us with her presence. And we had Betty Sungura, the CEO, National Gender and Equality Commission for Kenya. A very interesting discussion in my view, discussing very, very critical issues touching on women and their space in diplomacy and international affairs. And listening to these iron ladies, I came to a great appreciation that the call for affirming women is not so much from a pity perspective or a pitiful angle. I was encouraged that it is actually a call for them to fight for their space and compete and do so effectively with their male counterparts. Later yesterday, we had another plenary session on think tank diplomacy. This segment was very, very ably managed by my very good friend, Professor Kasaija Apuli, professor at Makerere University. Amongst the people he was having this discussion with are very, very renowned Kenyan sons, very respected commentators on social, economic, and political issues that included Professor Peter Kagwanjo, President and Chief Executive of Africa Policy Institute, Dr. Rosa Esko, co-founder and President, Sochin Research Institute, and Professor Macharia Munene, Professor of History and International Relations at USIU Africa. The discussant in this session was Dr. Andre Pro. In the afternoon, we had parallel panel discussions where the monographs were under interrogation. And for this, we had a segment for peace and security, and then one on international political economy. Our moderators for these sessions was Dr. Claire Amuhaya, and then there was Edward Kakumo. And finally, we had Mr. Richard Atwaru, facilitating one of those. Now let's quickly go to what we have lined up for today. Ladies and gentlemen, today we have scheduled to have a quick and punchy conversation around trading for peace. And we are very privileged to have someone with us who I want to consider as the keynote speaker to first paint a picture for all of us. Pursuant to that, we'll have a sit down and discuss, delve deeper by way of a discussion on the question of trading for peace. A segment that we'd like to keep very light, but insightful as well. For those who will be joining us for this conversation includes Dr. Claire Amuhaya. I'll tell you at what point you can come up. Dr. Kizito Sabala, you'll help us bring a spin in this discussion. Ms. Elizabeth Mutunga, Head of Governance, Peace and Security, Common Markets for East and Southern Africa, will also be having this conversation with us, including a young technocrat who is also our key speaker this morning. So ladies and gentlemen, to start us off, I would like to invite to the stage Ms. Jacinta Kiruthi. Ms. Jacinta Kiruthi is here in her capacity, or rather representing Kenya Chamber of Commerce and Industry, where she serves in the capacity of Intra-Africa Trade Committee. Outside of that, she is the CEO of what we call InTrade, which focuses in the implementation of the AfCFTA in Africa. I hope I got that right, and you can correct me if I've made a mistake. Ladies and gentlemen, let's put our hands together and welcome Ms. Kiruthi to the stage. Karibu sana, and thank you very much for honoring us with your presence. Thank you. Another big round of applause, please. Let's.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Good morning once again. All right, my name is Jacinta Kiruthi. I'm here representing the Kenya National Chamber of Commerce and Industry. I'm sure most of you have had some sort of interaction with your chambers, both locally and wherever it is that you're from. As you might know, the chambers are representative of the private sector. So this particular panel will be pivoting the conversation and giving us a sense of hope in what sort of direction we should be taking. So welcome to what I would call the graveyard shift. The graveyard shift tends to be the last session of any conference. You can see that there are very many empty desks. I'm sure at the beginning of the conference, it was houseful, but now you have spots of empty slots. But I think you should give yourself a pat on the back and say, you know what? I made it to the last day. Give yourself a pat on the back and say, you know what? I made it to the last day. So just a bit of a background. I am a tax and customs consultant. I spent the bulk of my career within the Revenue Authority, looking at how relevant the revenue authorities are within our economies. And when I listen to this conversation, it's about regional integration. Now, perhaps you might have heard of the AFCFTA. It's a bit of a mouthful. The AFCFTA. Not many people are able to get those acronyms together. The AFCFTA is one of 15 pillars of the Africa Union under Agenda 2063. And the AFCFTA is the trading arm of the Africa Union. So that is the sort of conversation that I will be looking at, and I look forward to making it as engaging as possible. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming, and I look forward to a very fruitful morning. Thank you. Oh, all right.
As is our tradition, another big round of applause to Ms. Kiruthi. Thank you very much, Ms. Kiruthi. That's a very good opener for us to start. Professor Kisinja, I'll make a request. You'll be my timekeeper. Hard stop at exactly 10:30. 10 minutes or 15 minutes to give me a sign. Thank you. I want to welcome to the stage, and just allow me to pick my nose just a minute. So at this point, allow me to welcome to stage Dr. Claire Amuhaya, Senior Lecturer, RUDN University in Russia. Karibu, Claire. A big hand to her, please. Then also allow me to invite on stage Dr. Kizito Sabala to help us in this conversation. Dr. Kizito. Last but not least, Ms. Elizabeth Matunga, Head Governance, Peace and Security, Common Markets for Eastern and Southern Africa. Kindly join us on the stage. Karibu. So the mic guys, if you could just help me pass the mics to our panelists. Cynthia, if you could help us. And just make sure they are on, please. Thank you. Let's have fun. Is it on? Okay, thank you. So I'll start with you, Dr. Sabalo. The title of the discussions for today is Trade for Peace. I've always thought it was peace for trade. Being a scholar, just give us what your perspective is on that. Trade for peace, and then I thought it was always peace for trade. But just your thoughts. Oh, the mic is, you can use this as we go. Mike, you need help?
Thank you, moderator, and good morning, participants. Trading for peace or peace for trade. The two are intertwined in the sense that for you to trade, you need peace. So in my own perspective, I think peace comes first so that you can trade. However, you also trade to promote peace, because the essence is that when you're trading with a country or with somebody, it is not easy for you to get into confrontation with him or her, because you have to maintain that level of interaction for you to be able to trade. But that's what I think.
Thank you very, very much. If you could pass it on to Elizabeth, just to also just give us your perspective on the twist. We are talking about trade for peace, and I'm arguing, I've always thought it's peace for trade. What are your views? Just your considered view. Yeah.
My considered view is actually not my considered view. Yeah. It is a view of research that we did. At the end of around 2006, you recall that the Great Lakes region was coming out of conflict. Yeah. In fact, it had kind of come out of conflict. It was a time of, it was a very optimistic time. Everybody thought, now this is it. We have just come out of Africa's First World War. That was a time when you have the DRC and Rwanda, and then a lot of countries backed both sides. And we thought as an organization, this is a perfect opportunity to ensure that this does not happen again, to stabilize the situation, because finally there is peace. So we did a research, and in the research we found out some very interesting things. One, it was despite the conflict, trade was going on unhindered. So we wondered, okay, so what are we going to do to assist this trade? Because, by the way, one thing I didn't mention is that COMESA has got a niche, which is that we should work on around the economic dimensions of conflict to make sure that we are not duplicating what others are doing, and just to get our own niche. So around that area, the question was, what should we do as COMESA? And we found yet something else from the research was that there was lack of information. So much lack of information that people are trading using what Kenyans call panya routes, back routes. And so we thought we could, our entry point would be to give the traders enough information. So to answer your question, yes, trade, strangely enough, goes on even when there is conflict. But at the same time, of course, when there is peace, trade happens probably in a more systematic and in a more defined manner.
It's very, very interesting. I didn't realize that it was researched work, so that is very, very insightful, and thank you very much. I'd like to pass on this conversation to Claire, and the question I'd like to ask Claire, now that we are talking trade, we are talking peace, as an expert in the space of IR and diplomacy, what are the linkages? What is the role of IR? What is the role of diplomacy within the space of trading and peace? Again, just your thoughts around that.
Thank you, Dr. Roa. I think when we speak about IR or diplomacy, sometimes we tend to forget the current diplomacy. The actors have expanded, so it's not only state actors. And sometimes we forget the role of, for example, business elites in politics, generally in national politics and even international. So I think when one understands the role of business elites and how they can affect diplomacy and their role in trade, it's very important because they can affect, they are a conduit for trade, which will lead to peace. By that I mean, for example, when two states are having issues, the business elites could actually play a role in trying to either suggest how, if they're going to have, for example, a conflict here, how they will be affected. And because of the muscle they have, they can influence in making sure that there will be no conflict. But also we have to look at it from another angle, where sometimes the business elites might be interested in conflict in order to benefit on the lack of checks. So for example, when you look at DRC, I think sometimes the conflict is actually promoted so that there could be illegal trade. So they play two roles. They can affect trade positively by ensuring, like for example, there wouldn't be the conflict, but also they can play a role in instigating conflict. And so we should be very careful in how that happens. So if one thinks their agenda is to instigate conflict for their own benefit, then that's where the diplomacy would play a big role. Yeah.
Very, very interesting. Very, very well articulated. I'll move on to Ms. Kiruthi. Hopefully your mic is on. My question to you is, and being very strong in the after space, how can nations leverage trade to promote peace? How can nations, and you can limit yourself to Africa, how can nations leverage trade to promote peace or vice versa? Yeah.
Thank you very much. And thank you for the invitation. All right, so I guess let's go back into what I call Economics 101, Maslow's law of needs. What is the most fundamental need for man? The basics, isn't it? Food, shelter, peace, security, all of those things. Now, my colleague here, Elizabeth, has mentioned something very interesting. Regardless of the fact that there is conflict, trade takes place. Now, what tends to happen is that it may not necessarily be formalized. So people will use the path of least resistance. So they will find alternative routes to get goods to cross. Why? Because there is a market need for those goods. I happened to work at the border in Namanga, so I was a witness to what was actually going on. So despite the fact that from a bigger political perspective, we might be made to see as if trade is not taking place, trade has actually never stopped. What tends to happen? It simply morphs into something else. And then the other thing that happens is that the market forces begin to adjust themselves. And that is when you find prices go up. And again, as my colleague has mentioned here, is that the people that tend to benefit are the people that want to keep the prices high. So we might be focusing on something called conflict, but we are forgetting there is also profit, okay? So when there is a conflict, believe it or not, that is when the prices actually escalate. And we should be asking ourselves, who wants the status quo to remain in place? It's the person who is profiting the most, isn't it? So when there is peace, then the market forces adjust themselves. And then you find that you're not paying too much for the products that are on the shelf. And then the artificial shortages that are created by that moment of conflict tend to disappear. So the question becomes, who is behind the conflict? So if we as a continent can realize that there is somebody profiting from the chaos that is taking place, it should snap us out and say, listen, there is no need to have these sort of altercations. Somebody somewhere is profiting at our expense. That is the bottom line. Trade is always taking place, but the question is, who gets the profit at the end? So peace, trade, it's the same side of the equation. So it depends on how you choose to look at it. And ladies and gentlemen, the taxman does not care. He will still come and collect his taxes. So I think it is in your best interests to put the weapons down and actually make sure trade happens, and then we bring down the cost of living. It's that simple. Thank you.
That is very, very, very well articulated. New insights for me, really. You'll still have the mic. So I'll ask you what you may consider an academic question. Is greater trading links synonymous to partnerships and harmonious foreign relations? Do you think greater trading links is synonymous to partnerships or harmonious foreign relations? Again, just your expert opinion.
Okay. Now, thank you very much for the question, Mr. Moderator. I will look at the question from the perspective of the African Union. The African Union came together a while back, or they've been coming together for a while. But this time round, it's a little bit different. There is an agenda called, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, Agenda 2063, the Africa we want. That agenda has outlined 15 very significant pillars that will propel the continent forward. One of the key pillars is the AFCFTA. So if you go into the Africa Union website, you will see Agenda 2063 and what it has highlighted. Now back to your question. What does this mean? It simply means that as a continent, where we should be heading has already been articulated by our heads of state. Remember, Africa has 55 countries. And I think this is something we also need to know. Outside of the World Trade Organization, Africa is the largest trading bloc. That is something we don't seem to grasp. There are 164 countries under the WTO, 20 observer nations. Africa comprises of a third of the trading blocs within the world. If we come and speak with one voice, the largest arable land on the planet is found in Africa. A third of the resources of the planet are found in Africa. The average age of the population within this continent is 19.5 years, meaning on the continent, on the planet, we have the youngest population. What does that tell you? That Africa is the last frontier. Africa is the last frontier. So if we speak with one voice, as the Africa Union is asking us and urging us to do, then we pivot the conversation to our favor. And that is what the AFCFTA is there to do. Now, the agreement was signed in 2018 in Kigali. Already, 46 countries have ratified that agreement. 46 countries. What does that tell you? That our heads of state are in agreement that the way to move forward is through trade. Now, this is the difference from what has happened in the past and what is happening currently. The Africa Union is only going to work with those countries or state parties that are willing. We will not wait and say we all have to be in agreement. We can never be in agreement. Even in your own families, you never have the agreement 100%. Not everybody agrees. But the minute you show willingness, then we move forward. And that is why so far, 46 countries have ratified the agreement. Under the Guided Trade Initiative, from last year, we only had 8 countries agreeing to trade together. As at this year, mid this year, when we had the ministers within the country, we had 29 countries under the Guided Trade Initiative. We had 100 products from 12 products last year. What does that tell you? We are simply not talking about it, yet it is happening. So what I think we need to do is change the narrative and stop focusing so much and giving credence to the conflicts, but actually the opportunities that have been created by our heads of state. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you very much. Elizabeth, I'll come to you now, and we will shed some spotlight on COMESA. We are talking about common markets, and here we are discussing peace and security. So my question is, to what extent has COMESA succeeded in delivering on its mandate, given the peculiarities of those two things that I mentioned earlier? And this is where you take the time you need to make all of us who don't understand what COMESA is all about to gain an appreciation of it. Over to you.
Okay, no, thank you very much. You're talking about COMESA's mandate, which is really the mandate of regional integration. And what happened for COMESA to decide to come together was that several countries realized that their economies were very small. Every country has got a very small economy. You cannot really develop if you have such a small economy. So they thought that let's get together and have one big market, and therefore we will be able to have a louder voice. And remember, I think the last speaker has just talked about we need to speak with one voice, and that was what was motivating the idea of regional integration. We get together, we speak with one voice. So the first stage in that regional integration is what we call a free trade area, such that all the countries are trading with each other. It's supposed to be duty-free and quota-free. We are almost, whatever Kenya charges to Uganda, the duties to Uganda, and whatever the duties that are charged to Zambia are all the same. It's a free trade area. Having done that, the next stage comes where the region decides now we need to move to the next step, which is that there should be a common external tariff. A common external tariff being that the countries, the whole region now has a free trade area, duty-free, quota-free trading, but then we charge the same tariff to a third country. So Kenya charges the same tariff to South Africa as Uganda does to South Africa, common external tariff. And then the third one comes in where there is having moved to that, and no, I think EAC has succeeded in that, but not many other regs have succeeded in that because we are really very huge. Some countries, for example, if you come to Eswatini has got, it belongs to SACU, which is a Customs Union of South Africa. And no country can belong to two customs unions because you have to belong in one customs union so that you can all charge the same external tariff to a third country. And then comes to the stage where you ensure that all the factors of production are standard. There's common movement of people and common movement and the movement of the factors of production. That is another huge challenge. Just the movement, the free movement of persons, as it is. I am in COMESA. I can't go to Egypt, even with my diplomatic passport, without a visa. I have to apply for a visa and take a few days, or at least me, I take a few days. Most of you would probably take like 2 weeks or something. It will take much longer. So the free movement of persons has become very difficult. Why? Because of the issues of terrorism. People are afraid that, you know, if you just allow people to come in, there are issues of terrorism. There's also that issue, especially, I'm sure most of you heard what happened in South Africa, where South Africa was very concerned that there were too many people coming in to take our jobs. So there's that issue as well. That issue of free movement of persons has become a very big issue, not just to COMESA, but to all the RECs. So those are some of the challenges that I've faced. And then, of course, it comes to the final stage, which will be the stage where we have the common currency. Just like the EU has a common currency, which is the euro. And in every one of these stages, I've mentioned the 4 stages, in every one of these stages, there are challenges. And for COMESA, for example, we have what we call the variable geometry. You move according to the pace of every member state, according to their capacity. So we do not, when we finally launch the free trade area, we don't have all the countries belonging to the free trade area. It took like about, several of them became members of the free trade area in 2000, but others joined in 2004, others 2006, and we still have about 3 countries that still do not belong to the free trade area, where they are doing duty-free, quota-free access. Of course, the reason is that some countries want to protect their industries. Since they want to protect their industries, they will not offer duty-free. They want, if I, for example, I'm a country that wants to protect my sugar industry, Kenya is very good at that, to protect my sugar industry, I will try and talk about all kinds of things to say, please give me some more space to strengthen my industry, to make sure the sugar industry, it becomes, it is very nascent, it has got these challenges and so on and so forth. So you find that every country that is trying as much as possible to make the best of the free trade area, yet, you know, yet not give too much of it and yet benefit from it. So in every one of these stages, there are challenges. And I don't want to spend too much time on the mic because I know there are other questions you have, but just to mention that it requires a lot of discussions, a lot of negotiations, and a lot of capacity building to every member state to try and not convince them, but try and ensure that that they all adhere to these phases.
Very interesting, Elizabeth. So I'll still press you a little bit. If you had to put value judgment in COMESA delivering on its mandate, and you could use any scale you want to use, what would you say that looks like?
I would actually, the difference between COMESA and most other RECs is that we have focused very much on economic integration. People don't even know we had a program on peace and security. They don't know we have got any other program. That was very, very deliberate. Because once you start dealing with matters of peace and security, it is the up subject. When there's a coup in West Africa, everybody hears about ECOWAS. So similarly, Southern Africa, when there's a problem with Madagascar, everybody will hear about. And that REC starts to concentrate so much on the peace and security issues that you neglect some of the economic development issues. COMESA did not do that. It focused very much on economic development. We have the largest free trade area, and it is COMESA that has been used to fast-track the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. So I would say that I would give it I'd say COMESA has done very well, despite that it has got 21 countries. It's very difficult to negotiate when you've got many countries, but I'd say COMESA has done very well. And I'm not being biased.
I'm very delighted with your response. I wasn't going to let you get away with that one. But thank you for expounding it very well. Now I'm going to go to a lighter side. This will be my last 2 questions, then we'll invite the floor. Professor, I hope I'm still okay? I'm good. My 2 last questions from here. I'll direct the first one to Dr. Kizito. Recent remarks by the Kenyan Deputy President that Kenyan representatives abroad who do not create markets for Kenyan produce or services will be recalled. It suggests a shift in focus and policy. Why would this be so? Does it mean that diplomats have not been doing trade?
I think for me, I think the statement is meant to steer and encourage the diplomats to take matters of economics and trade very seriously. I think if we listen to the Swedish ambassador yesterday, she mentioned about areas in which the present diplomats must specialize in, and trade and economics is one of them. The fact that the present relations are more or less driven by economics rather than even politics, for me it seems to suggest that if you are a diplomat, you must move away from the traditional diplomats, where if you go to the other books, they say the diplomat was meant to go and lie on behalf of his country abroad. I think that statement has lost weight. Today's diplomats must be multifaceted. They must deal with issues of economics. They must deal with issues of peace. They must deal with issues of environment. They must deal with issues of climate change. They must understand a few issues about international law and so on. So I think the statement is meant really to inspire and encourage the diplomats that you are not just there to attend the cocktails and so on and so on. You are there to represent your country on matters of politics, on matters of trade, on matters of environment, and all other fields.
Amazing. Thank you very much. Claire, from me, what will most likely be my last question? Let's take a focus on the academia and let's look at the discussion we're having today and what Dr. Sabala has just mentioned. Is the academia doing enough to bridge the gap between IR, diplomacy, and say the subject of the day, trade?
When you speak about doing enough, you know, the academia, their role or their work is, for example, if you have a unit in IR and diplomacy, we've noted that the courses keep changing to adapt to the current issues. So, for example, right now, or personally, I teach a course on development cooperation, and it actually it targets Global South, and the idea is to try for them to understand how economics, or rather how politics influences economics. So I think in that sense, we play a huge role. So when we speak about, for example, the OSCP, the Organization for Africa, Caribbean, and Pacific States, when you are able to, go back to the history and understand how Africa was able to get into this partnership with Europe, what was the agenda? How did that come about? So when these things started, for example, at the time of when we were gaining independence, so you understand that some relation in, for example, Europe trying to maintain its relation with African countries is because of the economic issues that they will benefit from the African state. So I think in academia we are doing enough because we are adapting to the changes and developing courses that are able to give individuals more insight on how politics and IR and diplomacy and economics are interrelated.
Thank you so much. Dr. Sabala, are the Kenyan universities doing enough? By way of just a quick comment.
I think they are doing more than enough. And if we listen to Professor Munene yesterday, he mentioned that probably one of the challenges in the Kenyan universities is lack of funding to allow the academics to think for the country. But I think given the limited resources, and the individual efforts of academics, I think they're doing more than enough, given the circumstances and so on. And probably COMESA may begin to think about a program that would support research in the universities.
Miss Kruthi is smiling in disbelief. Miss Kruthi, do you have a reaction to that? Do you have a reaction to that? I saw you smiling before we go to the floor.
Well, thank you. I'm an alumni of that university, so I think they've done very well.
Okay.
I think we turned out great
Okay.
under the circumstances. But also, I would like to challenge academia, because I was in that institution for 4 years plus an extra 2. That means I did my higher learning there as well. And when you get out into the real world, I find there's a bit of a disconnect. All right?
Yeah.
With reality, from reality and what it is that you're taught by your very able professors. So credit to them, they do engage your mind, but it needs to move a step further. And I think there was a very vibrant program once upon a time, I was not privy to it, where the young students were required to go for internships. I think that is something that is very important, that needs to be revived, so that there is no disconnect between what is being taught in the university and what is happening in the real world. So you find the people that graduate come out very, lost. And what is happening on the ground does not relate to what it is that they were taught. So I would just give it back to my very good professor and request that the universities engage a lot more with what is happening within the economy by giving the young students exposure, to even forums such as this, so that they engage in the conversation early and then, they become productive citizens.
Interesting. Elizabeth, you're in that space where you engage both scholars and practitioners. What is your quick comment on this? Are academia doing enough?
No, I think I agree with both of what has been said. And actually, I'm the head of governance, peace and security in COMESA, and one of the things we do is that we engage interns. Yeah. But one thing I'd say is that the professors teach you to think. Yeah. I'm a geologist by profession. Yeah. You're just taught to think, and once you know how to think, you can do almost anything else.
Yeah. Interesting. Thank you very, very much. I'm coming to you in a minute. Professor, how much time do I have? 27 minutes. So 7 to time, you let me know. Okay. So we'll now go to the floor. And I've seen, there are a couple of hands up. Okay, we'll start. I will insist on rules of engagement, precision, crisp questions. The question should not go beyond 30 seconds in the way of its expression, so that we can as many questions as we can. We start with Dismas. Keep it short and punchy. And I suggest the panelists write down what they ask, because I may ask any of you to take it up or order.
Julian, can I take 29 seconds instead of 30?
Please do. I'll be very happy if you do that.
My question is for Elizabeth. To what extent does personality clashes between state leaders compromise trade integration? Thank you.
Thank you very much. You've set the trend on how we want to do it. The guy, you have a question?
Yes.
Just like this must did, please.
Thank you. To Elizabeth also, just to get a clarification on the tripartite free trade area, because I know this was a collaboration between COMESA, SADC and EAC. And so far the CFTA kind of took it and just broke it down. So is it still viable and will it be established, maybe probably going forward? Thank you.
Thank you very much again. Elizabeth, you got that? You happy with it? Okay, the next question. Yeah, Jackie's, and then the lady behind you. Oh, it's okay. It's coming back to you. It will come back to you.
Yeah,
all right.
Thank you very much. My name is George. My question is to Jacinta, and I'm looking at what she's alluded to in terms of the nexus between peace and development, or peace and commerce. And I'm looking at the political war economy, especially in Africa and the Horn of Africa. The 4 Ps. There is the power, there is also the peace, but there is also the vested interests that are there. How do you then delink this from what is happening, especially like what has happened in Sudan, almost destroyed everything economically there? So isn't it important?
Thank you very much. Yeah, we have set a very good trend. Next, Jacques, and then maybe we will go into answering those, then we come back. Is that okay? So we don't...
Thank you. Jacques Muhindo is my name. I'm addressing my question to Ms. Elizabeth. There is a problem of the cost of transport on the continent, especially in our region. When you compare, for example, the cost of transport of a container from Mombasa to Goma and the cost of the same container from Guangzhou to Mombasa, you wonder if we are still in the same region. The same for the transport of person. When I take my flight ticket from Nairobi to Lubumbashi, it's more expensive than my flight ticket Nairobi to Vienna. So what's COMESA doing to solve that issue of the cost of transport for both persons and goods?
Thank you very much. I know you have more than one question, but we'll take that first. Okay, thank you. We start with Elizabeth, you go first. Yeah.
Thank you very much. The first question by Dismas: to what extent does personality clashes between member states constrain or affect the regional integration agenda? To answer that question, I'll just give you two examples that have happened in COMESA that have been a very big issue. Starting off with before COMESA had a program on peace and security, there were very big clashes between the president of DRC and the president of Rwanda. And when they sat in the meetings where they were supposed to discuss the issues of integration, the meeting would not move with attacks and counterattacks, attacks and counterattacks, to the extent that that was the reason that that a program on peace and security was established, so that you can go and clash on those issues in that forum. Let us talk about integration in this forum. Then in our forum, which is a forum on peace and security, even that could not move ahead because of Ethiopia and Eritrea. Those clashes between those two countries could lead us to discuss until past midnight on just the same thing back and forth. So yes, that had to be removed, otherwise it would have completely constrained integration. But remember I talked about the variable geometry, that even if there are two countries that do not agree on a certain issue and a decision has been made out of consensus, then that decision carries the day. Countries that do not want to implement it, maybe because of whatever reasons, maybe it's because of those clashes in personalities, can actually take their time to implement. Then there was a question about the tripartite free trade area and how viable it is given that there's a continental free trade area. Now the tripartite free trade area was established between COMESA, SADC and East African Community. The reason being what I mentioned earlier on, that there's no country that can belong to two customs unions. As long as all the RECs had just started their program, there was no problem. But as soon as the RECs started to establish customs union, starting with the EAC started with this customs union, I think I'm not so sure, maybe 2006, I don't know, someone can correct me. But as soon as EAC started to establish its customs union, it became very important for all the three RECs to sit together and harmonize their program, harmonize their tariffs. The harmonization is what would have now allowed them to all have different customs union, so long as there is harmonization, as long as it's harmonized. Fast forward to your question, why are you doing this when you already have an Africa free trade area which is dealing with the whole continent? If you look at look at every free trade area, every free trade area that has been established, it takes a very long time. EAC could have been quite faster than the others because you're talking about few countries. Talking about Africa with these 54 countries, you can imagine how long it will take to agree on certain things. And therefore, it's still viable and it is still good for COMESA, EAC, and SADC to proceed with their with the tripartite free trade area, and they shall catch up with us when they eventually agree. So there's no contradiction in that. We are really all working together on that. Finally, the question which I did not want to answer, one of the infrastructure, that the cost of transport, which is very, very true. And you can see that this now comes to, every country has got its internal issues. Even as the countries agree on infrastructure, some countries are faster than others, But what COMESA is doing is that it is building the capacity of the member states on matters of infrastructure. But if you look at the independence, and someone mentioned this, I think, in the course of this conference, that the colonial powers were just interested in extraction. So they developed very good infrastructure from wherever your production is to the port and out. But if you go inside, where some of the biggest, some of the potential lies, getting that potential to the main road is a problem. But again, you all belong to countries, you know how your countries are, you know how, you know the priorities in infrastructure. But I can say that COMESA is helping in building capacity, but we don't give money to anybody to build roads. We can just talk about harmonization and policies. I hope that answers your question.
Amazing stuff. So, Ms. Jacinta, you're taking a question, right? Over to you. Thank you, Elizabeth, for your responses.
Thank you, Elizabeth. That was very comprehensive. Mr. George, thank you. And thank you for listening. Now, peace, profit, power. How do we delink? Right? How do we delink that conversation in such a way that everybody benefits? Now, I will take it from a very personal perspective. I'm currently sitting in the Intra-Africa Trade Committee of the National Chamber. And the mandate that we have been given is to implement or to accelerate the implementation of the national strategy for the AFCFTA. Now, the constitution of that committee was very clear, or the chair was very clear, and he said, I want people that are actually professionally qualified to do the job. Right there and then, he has delinked politics from economics. It has to get done, okay? So, it begins from a very simple premise. Now, we can choose to politicize the committee and decide that, it will go this other way. But at the end of the day, we have deliverables that we have to demonstrate that the AFCFTA has been implemented at national level. So now let us magnify that at country level, continental level, regional level. It's the same discussion. What is going to be the priority? Are we going to move ourselves forward, or are we just going to focus on keeping the status quo? We have the responsibility to make that decision. And we have to demonstrate at a personal level that the change matters to me. We cannot be saying that it is about our leaders, our leaders, our leaders. The change that I want to see starts with me. Where I sit, I make that change. And then it has what we call a ripple effect. So I have been put in a position where I cannot politicize my situation. I have to make it work for the greater good. So if we move forward with that notion that the responsibility does not lie with somebody else, it lies with me, then chances are that we will see where the difference begins. Because remember, we are responsible for electing our leaders. Now, if we all are speaking in one voice, chances are that that leader who is not following our agenda will have to go, isn't it? So the critical mass is important, but the critical mass always begins with the one, I. So we get that right, chances are that we will have pivoted the conversation, and then we will see a better Africa. I hope I have answered your question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jacinta. The next hands up, no, I will not give you the mic a second time. I'm looking, we were told about 50-50 yesterday. the ladies in the room. Where are they? Let's start with the two ladies, then I come back to gentlemen. Start with the lady, right, and then you go back. I insist, short, precise, punchy. Under 30 seconds.
Okay, my name is Rebecca Ndeto. My question was on customs union, and Elizabeth already answered that. The second question was on foreign investment, and how can COMESA region implement or improve the ideas that we have to attract foreign investors? Thank you.
Is this to Elizabeth? Your question, or
Yes,
Jacinta?
yes.
Oh, okay, great. And then let's go to the lady at the far end, and then we take a gentleman. Or two gentlemen. Short, precise.
Thank you. My name is Bridget Amesa. My question is to the professor and the two ladies, COMESA and after. So you talked about getting the job done, and that these upcoming areas, yesterday AI was mentioned, today we are talking about trade. So are the young people, to the professor now, do you think that the content, the curriculum you teach is making us young people equipped for the market, and then to now COMESA and after?
Now, just sit, then I'll take the next question. I'll come back to you. Yeah, thank you. So, Professor, you take that question. I saw, yeah, please give me your question. Yeah. Professor, that was yours? That was your question. The last one was yours. No, you're not answering now. Yeah. Okay. Short, one, punch.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Adaka Evans from Zambia. My question goes to Madam Mutunga. I wanted to find out how far has the COMESA Customs Union gone in terms of ratification by members, and also its possible contributions towards the promotion of peace and security in the region.
Thank you very much. Nicely precise. Let me take his question first, because you raised your hand just after him. No, him first, yeah. I thought your hand has been up quite a bit. Or you are donating?
Okay, maybe I can ask my question.
No. Okay, just give him that. You can pass it back. I thought I saw your hand up for a long time. That's why. Yeah.
Good morning, the panel. I'm Stephen Molea from Zambia. My question is the question we receive from almost every student in this field of study. When we look at the Continental Free Trade Agreement, we have the customs unions, preferential trade areas, free trade areas, most favored nation status, by multilateral agreements, spaghetti bowl, eventually of the Rex. The moderator asked the panel to self-evaluate.
I insist precision.
Okay. Yeah. What is your uncensored action plan for detangling the regional economic communities?
Your question is to who?
I think Dr. Sabala.
Dr. Sabala. I'll throw that question to Jacinta. It's okay. Yeah. Jacinta, I hope you picked it up, yeah? Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, not to worry. So let's go on with that. Elizabeth, you start first, then Jacinta, as I consult my timekeeper. Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, the first one was regarding the foreign investment and how do we improve our environment for to encourage foreign foreign investment. When people are trying to invest in our country, there are several things that they look at. One of them is issues like the perception of corruption. Why would I go to invest in a country where there is a lot of corruption? And that's why you see some organizations that continue to list down the perception. But there is a perception of corruption. It is not corruption. It is a perception of corruption. And let me just backtrack a bit, if you allow me, Chairperson.
Go ahead.
Yesterday I heard in the forum that I was in, and they were talking about branding and issues of corruption. And my mind kept going to Kenya between the time President Moi changed to President Kibaki. And you all recall, because I notice a lot of you are Kenyans, you all recall there was a lot of discussions all over the world about the corruption in Kenya. And it was only because it was more open. People are allowed to talk. You're allowed to talk, and therefore it was out there. So anyway, that is that issue, the perception of corruption. And one thing we need to do is we need to change the narrative. If it is, we need to change the narrative to ensure that we are not perceived to be corrupt. First of all, we should not be corrupt, that is important. But number two, we should not be perceived to be corrupt. Then the other thing is there is the ease of doing business. There are some countries which try to protect their own businessmen so much that they make it so difficult for anybody to do business in their country. There are a lot of non-tariff barriers, a lot of fill this form, fill that form, fill this form, and the forms are so long, just a whole lot of things that just make it difficult for somebody. Again, that is something that needs to be done, that the countries must agree on commonly to make it easy for people to trade. And of course, issues like money laundering. When a country is known that it does not have strong anti-money laundering laws and strong anti-money laundering regimes, again, you discourage investors. Basically, it's just to identify those factors, and there are several of them, and agree as a region that we need to ensure that these are that they are addressed. Then the other question that came was how the customs union has assisted. How far is COMESA in implementing its customs union? The customs union was launched, and so far we say that COMESA does have a customs union. It's all work in progress. Like I said, it's very incremental. Different people join it at different times. So it is incremental, and it is very difficult to see progress on something that is moving so slowly. But nevertheless, I would say that the problem we have in the area of peace and security is that if I am able to do something to prevent a conflict, you will never know I have done it. You will never know is that it's my action that has prevented the conflict, because the conflict has not taken place. So in the same place, it is very difficult to know. It may be happening, and I'm sure it is happening because countries want to be in good terms with their trading partner. And therefore, they will avoid that conflict, but they might use another ally to go and fight. So it's hard to tell that it's preventing conflict, but I believe it is preventing the conflicts.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Jacinta?
Yes, thank you very much. I'll be responding to the gentleman from Zambia. Untangling the spaghetti balls. I hear that a lot, especially in the conversations of regional integration, where we are made to believe that the 8 RECs within the Africa Union are a problem. The Africa Union does not see them as a problem. They see them as building blocks. Okay? So when we move away from perceiving ourselves as being an entangled mess, we will, as I said, the conversation is always two-way. The Africa Union does not see or perceive it as an entanglement. It is somebody else from the outside who has chosen to advance that narrative. The Africa Union has taken the 8 regional economic communities within the continent as building blocks. So, COMESA, for example, as Elizabeth has very wonderfully articulated, is at a different level of regional integration. They're moving towards a customs union. That is 21 countries. Why in goodness sake, would the Africa Union now come and try and break it down? No. They will take the success factors that 21 countries have acquired and now escalate that to the rest of the 54 countries. So she has again rightly articulated that the East African community, because we are 7 countries, we have succeeded in getting to a very integrated level of even having a single passport. Why disintegrate that? Why not take the learning lessons in that and then escalate them so that we are not always starting from scratch? So I think we need to get away from the construct that's given to us by somebody else from outside and is not engaged in what is happening on a day-to-day basis. So thank you very much for your question, but please remember the 8 regional economic communities are actually building blocks of the bigger Africa and not an entangled mess. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jacinta. I'll take the last two questions. Yeah, I'll take from the ladies. Those will be our last questions for today. Let's start with a young lady. Yeah, right there, and then we go to Andrea.
Good morning, I'm S.E. and my question is to able Dr. Sabala. So do you think in bridging the gap in transitioning from our university to the real world, do you think we should start advocating for mandatory internships in our universities?
It's a good question. Very, very good question. That's for you, Professor. And then Andre, sorry? Oh, you've lost me.
No worries. Thank you very much to the panelists. My question is for Madam Elizabeth Mutunga. What is the COMESA response or policy response to illicit trade and illicit financial flows which serve as revenue for insurgent groups or terrorist groups, if you buy into that discourse? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andre. Elizabeth, you go first. And then Professor, you finish with the question second, and we will call it a wrap.
Yeah, okay. The question you've asked actually stems to the answer I had given, that you really need to ensure that you strengthen money laundering. When you're talking about illicit financial flows, you're talking about you're talking about either money that has been acquired illicitly, or money that has been transferred illicitly, or money that has been used illicitly. Now, COMESA has got a very strong program actually on anti-money laundering, and in our program, what we do is we handle that program comprehensively. We look at, first of all, of course, we understand what money laundering is. It is just using money that has been illicitly acquired, washing it up, and then acting up as if it has not been illegally used. So the first step that we do is to support all the financial intelligence units in our region. We support them in establishing strong analytical capacities, because the financial intelligence units are the ones that receive the transactions from the banks, from the different banks, from all kinds of either designated or non-designated financial institutes. So even from casinos and others, they get it, and they analyze and see whether there is some, the suspiciousness of it. That is the most important body in member states, and it is the one that we really target to try and ensure that their analytical capacities are good enough to identify suspicious transactions. But that is not enough, because even if they identify suspicious transaction and then the law enforcement is not able, therefore, to prosecute, becomes a problem. In fact, in the implementation of our program, we have seen the weakest link has been the law enforcement, either because they don't know how to follow the money. If you look at a policeman, the policeman knows how to get a criminal. They have been taught how to fingerprint. They've been taught all these things. And when he goes to his boss, he says, I have, managed 5 criminals, and he's given a promotion. Nobody ever asks this policeman whether he has been following the money. The law enforcement have not been taught to follow the money. And that's one of the things that COMESA is doing. We are trying to build the capacity of the law enforcement to follow the money, to prosecute, and so on. In Kenya, for example, so well, you see crimes that have taken, that this was a crime, and then it comes out and you hear that there was no evidence. That is so often the case, and that is especially the case when you're dealing with following the money, because perhaps they do not understand the laws. So we are assisting countries they're assisting the law enforcement, but we are also assisting countries to strengthen their laws according to the Financial Action Task Force. The Financial Action Task Force, FATF, sets the ultimate laws regarding money laundering. So we work with all our member states to see that their laws are aligned to FATF. And the final thing that we do is to establish closer collaboration. This is a transnational crime, and therefore you need to ensure there is collaboration between countries. So we are doing a lot in trying to ensure that the countries are strengthened in their money laundering regimes. That was the only
Thank
question.
you. Yeah, thank you so much. And we take the answer from Professor as the last item of today.
Thank you. Two questions. One on university curriculum and the other one on mandatory internship. Does the university curriculum speak to the realities in the industry? I'll say that university curriculums are supposed to be flexible and dynamic, in the sense that they capture the needs or the situation at the time they are being reviewed or being developed. But the university also allows a period of practice, and then after 5 years or so, this curriculum is supposed to be reviewed. Unfortunately, there are a lot of delays in reviewing university programs. Some of them even go for 10 years. And on the other side also, there is a problem of believing that all the units or the courses must be relevant to your needs and so on. I think all of us were in primary schools, we went to secondary schools, and we went to the universities. There are those things you learned in primary school, and you look back and you're like, why was even the teacher teaching this thing to me? I've never used it. I'm almost retiring, or I've retired, and I've never used this. So some of these units are just for your knowledge and also understanding, so that you are a holistic person or individual. But at the same time, it depends on your own understanding. You pick one and you become a specialist in it. That's why when we go to the universities, you find some of us go to history, others go to geography, others go to physics, and so on and so on. It's because of that interest that was inculcated into you when you are doing all those subjects, and you left more than 80% of them you left behind. On the question of mandatory internship, I think it's extremely important to have these kind of internships. I've never understood why, for example, organizations do not, some organizations even do not have a policy to assist the upcoming scholars, students, careers, and so on, to be just in their offices for 3 months or 6 months and so on. I think for me it is very important, and probably the government may require to have a deliberate policy that compels various industries to really embrace the issue of internship. Sometimes it happens at a university industry level. For example, you get a lot of students from computer science. They have several industries or factories and farms where the university sends them after they have finished 3 or 4 years, and they learn a lot from the field or practical experience. I think internship is very important, and it is something that should be promoted. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I really appreciate the extent of time you've taken to explain that, because we are also promoting emerging young talent, and that was amazing. Thank you very much. I'll give our panelists exactly 30 seconds each to make your closing remarks. I'll start here. 30 seconds to make your closing remarks.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for having us. Do not waste the opportunity to look at yourself as part of the bigger whole. We are 55 countries within Africa. We are the largest trading bloc outside of the WTO. If you engage in this conversation, you change the narrative. Only you can change the narrative. Only I can change the narrative. I have enjoyed being part of this panel.
Thank you.
And have a fantastic weekend. Thank you.
And we've loved having you around. Thank you very much. Dr. Claire, 30 seconds exactly.
Thank you. Maybe before if you will allow me, someone who asked on detangling regional communities. As she said, it's not a problem, but nevertheless, one of the ways they've tried to do it is the tripartite actually, the work is supposed to solve some of these problems. As she was explaining, the issues of customs union, because of the different organizations having different levels or having different ways of how they want to conduct it. So one of the ways is they've formed tripartite, so like COMESA, SADC, and EAC. And it's supposed to be like that in all the other regions. In terms of peace and security, the states it's mandatory for all states not to belong to more than one regional force. So someone cannot be a member of East African Standby Force and a member of SADC Standby Force. So that has also tried to be solved. Now, just to conclude, I'd like to say regional, bilateral, and international economic interdependence can be a conduit for peace. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And again, my personal greatest appreciation for what you've done on stage today. Over to you, Dr. Isabel.
Thank you for your questions. Trading for peace, promote trade to promote peace, and also promote peace to promote trade. When we talk about trade and so on, don't have those big companies and so on in your mind. I think you can start small and grow and grow and grow. And I think the history of some of the organizations or industries that we see actually started very, very small. So when you talk about trade for peace, don't imagine those huge industries and factories. You can start small. In fact, I want to challenge all of you to contribute an equivalent of 2,000 shillings each, and you start small business.
Thank you very much. And Professor, three in the end, better part of today, thank you for having the grace of indulging me. Thank you. Elizabeth?
My final word, trading for peace in the era of polycrisis. We are at a time that things are not getting better with climate change. Things will not get better. We are faced with terrorism. We are faced with all kinds of issues. And I keep repeating the word that they won't get better. And what the message I give is that we need to have a very strong trading bloc, not trading Kenya, but a trading region, so that we can have a louder voice to be able to ensure that our country, that our region is is competitive. The resources have been diminished. My message is to the youth. That is 60% of our population. Please take it and run away with it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A big round of applause. I think we can do a better job than that. A big round of applause. Yeah, thank you very much. So I invite you for a cup of tea as the rest of us, the panel, take their picture, and we should reconverge or reconvene in 30 minutes. Cameraman, if you could indulge us. Everybody else, you're free to leave, but if you still want to stay on, that's fine. Thank you. come back. All right, great. IRSK, COMESA, Accord, I really want to thank you for this opportunity. I want to thank you for bringing good people together. For me, it has been a moment of reflection and learning. I go away the richer. Very, very grateful to you all. Dr. Mocha, that's it, Chair. So at this point, I'm going to invite Dr. Sabala to just step forward. We are doing presentation and adoption of the outcome statement. So I don't know how you've organized yourself, but you have about 30 minutes for that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Julian. Ladies and gentlemen, we are almost coming to an end of this 2.5 days event, and this is the last session we are having. The way we are going to proceed is we shall have some closing remarks from the partners to this conference. But before that, we have teased out a few recommendations which Dr. Mwenjao will share with us. And we are free to add 1 or 2 recommendations that will help us to move forward. We are not going to have a flurry of 10, 20 recommendations, but these recommendations are just meant to help us determine the next steps for the organization and also for the events that we hope to have in the future. After those presentation of the recommendations, we shall have a vote of thanks from our partners. And I'll also speak very briefly about the next steps in terms of the papers that you have presented, so that we are all on the same page on way forward before we leave. So I want to invite Dr. Mwenjo to just share with us what he has been writing. Thank you.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Yes, so we are coming to the end of the conference, and I think we've had a very successful conference, which, in our view, has elicited a lot of thought-provoking ideas. And yesterday, some of us stayed here up to around midnight, trying to put together some ideas and some thoughts that would then be captured in the report. But we'd like to share them with you today, so that we could perhaps get input from you as we formulate them or as we refine them, with the intention of having them published in the report. So let me just consult quickly before I proceed. Ready, Dr. Oita, just you can bring the laptop over. So yes, we are looking at the recommendations of the this forum, and we feel that there's quite a bit of areas where some bit of clarity in terms of the wording but also in terms of the ideations would be helpful. And then we will then, like I said, adopt that into the report, which will then be shared with the partners and eventually with everyone, participants, and then everyone else. So I think, so there's still quite a bit of work to do after this, including the papers that were submitted, including now going back, improving certain aspects, or again, including the suggestions or the feedback and comments that were made during the our presentations. And I think, but from what I've heard from the participants, most of the papers were very good, or they were, the quality was high, and we feel like we will have, or we are very confident that we'll have a very good publications. One of which is going to be by Accord. I don't know if you want to share anything about the publications by Accord.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Mensah. So at Accord, we have an accredited peer-reviewed journal called the African Journal on Conflict Resolution. And the scope of that journal is basically to cover the area of conflict management, conflict analysis, broadly speaking, limited to the African continent and the diaspora. So what we'd like to do is put out a special edition of that journal to be co-edited by the members of the technical team of this conference. So we would invite all the authors who have produced papers that specifically relate to peace and security to submit their manuscripts for consideration in the special edition of the journal. And in terms of the publication timeline, it's normally, it would be to have submission start around end of this year, publication in the second half of 2024, but all those details will be sent out. Thank you, Dr. Mensah.
So I don't know, should I invite any question now or later in terms of your publication?
I can take questions now,
okay,
if you'd like.
Is there any question in that regard? So I think you've made it clear, like the peace and security papers will be published by Accord.
Yes, we invite authors to submit for consideration. They will undergo a double-blind peer review process in line with our...
Thank you for that clarification, yes.
So we can't guarantee publication, but you are welcome to submit for consideration.
Thank you. Do you want to add anything, Dr. Sabala? Yeah,
just to say that...
Go ahead.
Is it working?
Yeah.
Just to say that don't be intimidated. I think most of the papers were extremely good, and the review process is a normal quality control process. And if you have looked at the journal by Accord, you'd agree with me that it is a quality journal, and you want your paper to be in a quality journal, and this is an opportunity. So I'm really hoping that once you get the points or comments to correct and revise your paper, you are going to take them seriously, you work on them, and there will be to and fro process, and after that, I'm very sure you'll be happy with the final product. So don't be intimidated, but also just be assured that the process will be fair, and if you work with the comments, there is no need to fear at all. So we want to welcome you, and those, we also have those members who expressed interest to come to this conference, but for one reason or another they have not come, and therefore we shall also give them an opportunity to still submit their papers. papers. They are not locked out. They may have failed to come to this meeting for one reason or another, but in terms of moving forward, we are going to consider for those who would have the intention of still submitting their papers. So the door is not closed. The door is not closed. It's open. Thank you.
Yeah, and while we are at that, in terms of publications or with regards to publications, I think Dr. Oita, you can speak to the other publication platform or option. So we've addressed the peace and security one, so now you can speak to the others.
Thanks, Dr. Muncha. While Dr. Pra and Accord will publish the peace and security papers, the other papers that we're talking about trade, the other papers we're talking about communication and trade within the COMESA region, those publications will be published internally. COMESA will publish it in a book, and that book also will thoroughly be taken through the various editorial policies within COMESA, and will ensure that the papers published are of quality. I mean, because COMESA is a brand, COMESA has a name. So anything that we put outside there should also be very, 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 very good. So we will review it internally, and then the moment it's finalized, we'll also publish it, and hopefully we'll be able to launch it in the next year's conference, inshallah.
Yeah. So I think Dr. Oita, do you want to comment about, sorry, Dr. Sabala, anything you want to add onto that?
No, just like the other ones which will go for the journal, this one also will take the same process. And we shall still invite those who did not get an opportunity to present here also to submit their papers. And I think it would be a good thing. What we are going to do as partners, we are going to sit down and agree on the deadlines on how we are going to work this. So expect this in the next few days, that you'll be expected to revise your paper, submit within this particular point in time, and then we review and so on and so on. We are heading into the festive season, and I think it is important that we do the corrections before that. And also some of the comments that were coming during the presentations here are valuable comments. Probably you may have already even begun to revise your paper using those comments, and I think it is a good thing that we do this before the close of the year, so that next year we engage in the process of reviewing and going to and fro. Editing is really an involving job, and probably the cooperation of all the members who will want to have their papers published will be extremely important, so that we move at the same pace. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any question again with respect to publications? Okay. Sorry? Timeline for COMESA, timeline for COMESA. I think it's the same as Accord's timeline, so we'll just use the same whatever timelines. Okay, so I think then I can go now to read the recommendations. And sorry, we don't have them projected. Do we have to project them, or should I just read them? Okay. So the first recommendation is that the partners to institutionalize research and discourse on the status of peace, security, and governance in the region, so as to inform policy and programming. So if I can repeat this, the partners to institutionalize research and discourse on the status on peace, security, and governance in the region, so as to inform policy and programming. The second one is the partners to work together to use their respective comparative advantages to collectively address structural causes of conflict in the region. This should take into account emerging challenges in the region through an interdisciplinary approach. Partners to institutionalize an annual conference on IR and diplomacy for IRSK to interrogate emerging issues in the region. The theme of the annual conference is determined by the contemporary peace, security, and governance issues arising at the time. So,
so you're at number? Number 4? Yes, I'll repeat number 4. Okay. As they are projecting recommendation number 4, I'll repeat that. Partners to institutionalize an annual conference on international relations and diplomacy for IRSK to interrogate the emerging issues in the region. The theme of the annual conference: the theme of the annual conference is determined by the contemporary peace, security, and governance issues arising at the time. The conference will act as a mentoring space for students, advocacy, and outreach. Use of the conference as a forum to build partnerships between academia and practitioners. That's recommendation 4. Going to 5, production of a publication which reflects the discussions which emanate from the conference. No, it's okay. Oh, okay. Thank you. We're just adjusting for best effect. Production of a publication which reflects the discussions which emanate from the conference. That's number 5. Then we go to number 6, the final one: utilizing digital platforms to disseminate the findings and contributions made in the conference. Yes, you can take back.
So should we open up each of them to comments, or should I? So we could start with recommendation number 1. If it's clear enough, we invite comments to partners on how partners can institutionalize research and discourse on the status on peace, security, and governance in the region, so as to inform policy and programming. So we invite comments with regards to this. Yeah, I can see a hand there. If we have a mic that can be passed on to him, Mr. Daka.
Okay, thank you. Evans Daka, once more my name, from Zambia. I think there was a discussion on the first recommendation on the challenges that are there with research and informing policies. So what modalities are we going to put in place to ensure that research really does inform policy and programming? Thank you.
Any other question? I think the panel can note that, can take note of that. Yes, I see there's a hand up here. Yeah.
My name is Loendo from Zambia as well. Yeah, maybe on the issue of coordination between, or maybe collaboration, I don't know these English terminologies, but now cutting the gap between think tanks or researchers, research institutions, and the policymakers. I don't know whether we can have a recommendation that speaks to that.
Just come again, sorry.
Okay. So my worry is on the gap between the think tanks or research institutions and the policymakers. So I'm thinking we could probably have a recommendation that responds to that, strengthening the coordination, yeah, between the two parties.
So you want, what you're suggesting is to frame it as perhaps institutionalized research and discourse on status of peace, security, and governance in the region, so as to strengthen instead of inform, or inform and strengthen.
Okay. This is a general view when I looked at the recommendations.
Yeah.
It could be an addition or fused into one of these, not specifically responding to
number
the
1.
first one. No.
Okay. We can add that. Okay. Any other comment? Yeah.
Maybe just to add on what he was saying, we can also try and look at how we can support trade in services in the region. Because
services?
Yes, trade in services. Because I think that's an area which has not really come out in this conference. And I think that's the area that think tanks and such organizations work in, so that we can trade in services, either COMESA can support it, or the East African region or other RECs and AU as a body. Yes, sir.
Okay. Is this with the, is this in the context of the AFCFTA or just COMESA? Because I know the trading services, their component hasn't taken off. Is that what you're alluding to?
Yeah, so
or just research on that space?
Yeah, to inform regulation in that space and what we can do, as well as IRSK to kind of our submissions. So.
Okay. So yeah, so trade is coming up as something that we also need to factor in. And I think the last session was very informative, the previous session before this one. Yeah. Any other comment? So if there's none, then I'll open up point number 2. Sorry, it's number 3, but it should be number 2. How the partners can work together and use their respective strengths to collectively address structural causes of conflict in the region. Yes, Madam Mutunga's hand was up, so please pass her the mic. No.
No, it's just a minor one. I think we shouldn't be just talking about structural causes of conflict, but just structural factors, whether they are causes or whatever, but factors, not causes. Then that broadens it a bit more.
So how you would word it as structural
factors
of conflict. Okay. And how is the second line or the second sentence? Is it okay? Okay, good. Anyone else who wants to come in on that point? Yes.
Yes, I know you have deceived us by putting 3, but we know it's 2. Okay, so on the same number 2, following up on what Elizabeth said, I think for me I would be more comfortable if we consider more on the prevention efforts. So these peace and security challenges are with us. Yeah, I think there's more need to focus more on prevention. Of course, taking advantage of corrective efforts to address structural factors. Maybe we should have something to do with prevention. I think that is maybe the only sustainable solution that we have at the moment. Yeah.
I think there was another hand up there. I think you didn't want to comment. Sorry, just repeat so that Dr. Oita can capture that point again.
His PhD, he has gotten it. You see, he's writing. So we are fine.
Men cannot multitask very well, so I was worried about that fact. Thank you, Dr. Oita. So does it read better now? Are you okay with this? Okay. So point number 4 or number 3, how partners can institutionalize an annual conference on IR and diplomacy for IRSK to interrogate the emerging issues in the region. Hand up.
Okay, this is not really to put there, but I was talking to Dr. Kizito on this one as well, that as you're talking about emerging issues in the region, we should really consider ensuring that there's a region geographic representation. For example, if you're dealing with terrorism, we should ensure that Egyptians are in this meeting. This was very Kenya-centric. So somehow to make sure that it gives a broader regional perspective. You may not have to put it here, but let's keep that in mind.
Yeah, and perhaps that's where a bit more thinking around, I don't know whether to call it mobilization or inclusion into the conference would be helpful from COMESA, because I think had about 50 abstracts, and some of them came from Zambia. We even have guys from Ivory Coast. But what came out is that I think there was an expectation of travel support, which I think then when it became clear that perhaps it would not be available, then some people did not send in their papers. So that's part of why I think, just to answer that question, because I think we had almost 4 papers from, or 4 abstracts from Zimbabwe, and I think the only one that, Dr. Makwanise, I don't know if you're here. Yes, and I think Dr. Ziso, but Dr. Ziso, we're not considering you as Zimbabwean because you're coming from Adelaide. So in this case, from Australia. So I think that's something then we could, as part of our strategy, see how to ensure that whether it's virtually or in person in the next forum, how we can do that. Yeah. Any question in that regard? And when I'm at that, I would also like to thank Madam Elizabeth and the entire COMESA team for supporting students to attend this forum. And I'm about 18 students whose participation has been supported by COMESA. So we don't take that for granted. And we think those students who are, some of us when we were in campus, we didn't get these opportunities. So I hope you take something from this and see how you can also contribute to this of forum when the next opportunity avails itself. So there are many people who would have wanted to be here. Like I said, almost 30. We got about 50 abstracts, but almost 30 did not come back because of, obviously, resources to be with us here. So you can see that there was a lot of interest. So more papers, more abstracts were not submitted than those ones who were presented here. So that says a lot. So let me just move on to the other one that, so are we okay with the first partners to institutionalize an annual conference on IR and diplomacy for IRSK to interrogate the emerging issues in the region? And then the theme of the annual conference is to be determined by the, or is determined by the contemporary peace, security, and governance issues arising at the time. The conference will act as a mentoring space for students, advocacy, and outreach. Use of the conference as a forum to build partnerships between academia and practitioners. Dr. Ziso, all the way from Adelaide, we would want you to also speak to that, if you don't mind. Can somebody maybe pass him the mic?
Thank you, Dr. Mwencha. I find the recommendation quite comprehensive enough, and especially emphasizing the role of students in the whole, conference organizing. And I am not sure if we can even involve them, from the very beginning, so that we can get their perspective, not just midway, but from the very beginning, so that we can have their full contribution, as it were. But I think I find the recommendation comprehensive enough. I do not have anything much to add or subtract from it. Yeah.
Okay. Any other comment? I think there's a hand there. So, any student who wants to comment, I think this is the opportunity for you to come.
Thank you. Masai David is my name. My name is a student at Technical University of Kenya. My contribution will be on that number 3, especially the last statement, the use of conference or forum to build partnership between academic and practitioners. Will it also not be proper, probably, to start also involving government? Or did you infer that practitioners deliberately also target government?
Yes, anybody, I think the panelists, anybody
Well,
wants
what
to
was the
respond?
thinking?
Okay.
Thank you.
And I think this is also, you can include the think tanks as well. Yeah.
Thank you.
What about the media? We can come to that later. Yeah, so then finally, production of a publication which reflects the discussions which emanate from the conference. So I think we spoke to that at the beginning, Accord publication and COMESA publication. So I think we can skip that one. And finally, utilizing digital platforms to disseminate the findings and contributions made in the conference. Yes, there's a hand there. Actually, 2.
Sorry to take you back a bit. Would it be possible to include at least one community leader in next conference?
Could you be more specific?
At least one community leader.
Could you be more specific? When you speak of community, I think you need to be more specific.
Yeah, I think that can be discussed later on to see who we can invite. Why? Because I think it will also help if we get those specific nuances from the community, especially when they are trying to add value to. So somebody whom we know can add value and also is a community leader. I think we can discuss about which type of community leader later on, but I think it's important to have representation at that level.
Any 2 maybe examples in terms of community for you?
If you would ask me, for me, I would think of a traditional leader or a religious leader, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, but we can still discuss to see how best we can. Okay. Yeah, if it's acceptable.
Yeah, I hope Dr. Pra and Dr. Waiter, you're keeping that at the back of your mind. Yeah. Did you want to respond?
No, not response, but something else.
Okay, yeah. Then I think there was another hand. You can come in after the question.
It's not question. On the 6th point on utilizing digital platforms, since young people tend to lie in that area, maybe you could utilize platforms like Instagram. I checked on LinkedIn. I'm not sure if IRSK has a page, but I didn't see one. So maybe you could recruit us to manage the page for you. And then on the fourth point, and you are asking a student to comment on a space for students, maybe you could engage with universities for MOUs so that some of them could maybe sponsor 2 or 3 students to come for the conference. So let's assume maybe it's Riara or Daystar, Strathmore, so that the university could maybe sponsor a few students to come and engage.
Thank you. With regards to the last point, Dr. Sabala, you now know what you need to do. You hear what your students are saying. But just quickly I just want to respond. We actually have a LinkedIn page. So I don't know where you checked, but we have a LinkedIn page. But we are open to help, okay? IRSK, and I just want to speak to this. IRSK is a flat organization. If you understand what management structure is, we are a flat organization. You come in and you say, I want to help with this, or I'm an expert in this, or I'll do this. We will be very happy to receive your help. So if there are any student here who feels I have a strength in this area, or any faculty member or professional who feels like, and that's why this conference has gone the way it did, because all of us, it was all hands on deck and all of us helped. And we're welcoming even more help and support from the participants in this conference. So yes, Dr. And then Dr. Pra, and then Madam Mutunga.
Yeah, just two points which we may want to consider. One is related to the point that Elizabeth raised about geographical representation and so on. And I think probably we are organizing how to make this a COMESA International Relations Society. So, we shall revisit the name and see how best we can do this. Probably, maybe even allowing our partners in different countries to come up with chapters that speaks to the same, and just see how we can have this as a bigger society that brings together international relations scholars, diplomats, and so on, those upcoming young men and women, and I think that would be good. The second one is kind of a recommendation. We have worked extremely very well with Accord and COMESA without any formal relationship, and I think one of the recommendations here should be actually the 3 organizations, or IRSK with COMESA, to consider an MOU, working relationship and so on, and with Accord also, so that we formalize our relationship. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Ari. Those are very important points. And I think, please pass mic to Madam Mutunga. Oh, okay, she has one.
Okay, yeah. Actually, we already have an MOU with Accord. We just need to maybe broaden it to include IRSK. No, the other is, my comment is just on number 6 as an advice to the organizers that you need to always include a disclaimer that the views of the researchers do not reflect the views of, because if you need, the researchers need to talk the way they were talking today, but some of the things said there could get a lot of people in a lot of trouble. So we just need to put that disclaimer.
Yeah. If
you're disseminating on an online digital platform which is open for everybody, okay, just make sure that is always.
Yeah. So our partners, Media Force, please take note of that, and then we'll make sure we have that done. Yes, I think there is a hand up. David Masai, the gentleman there. But before, there was a lot of clapping when Dr. Sabala said we are thinking of having this as COMESA, International Relations and Diplomacy society. Because last night, some of us were here till I said midnight, and those are the things we were, as we were trying to put this together, those are some of the things that came to mind. We as Kenyans feel a bit selfish when we say that it's going to represent the entire, we feel like it's not very inclusive when you just say it's IRSK and then you want to bring other people on board. So if there's a way that can happen, and maybe through the good offices of Madam Elizabeth, we'll be very happy to see how that can be done, and also including with the participants here. So that's something you can have at the back of your minds, and I think it's something we are open to. So, yes, David.
Thank you, Dr. Hari. I just wanted to amplify the nature of partnership and probably the branding that we are considering. Now that, especially from the student side, we actually saw that there's a gap. We have a society here, we have an actor of COMESA, but our link with university seems to be the weak point. Is there a way we can be able to mainstream that? So that we have probably a framework on how we onboard participating universities and how they can actually strengthen their engagement on this framework. A very good one example, like look at the disseminations or the publications that come out of this. I know quite a number of universities now today, they have digital repositories. Probably some of the discussions that come out of this could be one of the digital repositories could be one of the carriers of those publications. And they'll actually be able to inform, especially for now, the students who are actually doing study on some of these thematic areas. They will find things that are very contemporary, also practical, so that we move out of what my sister was referring to. That yes, you ought to have been taught, but when you came to the market, and the beauty of discussion like this, it has a convergence of market practice and a bit of theory. So it really simulates closer to reality, and especially with a partner like COMESA, you have a feel of how the practice looks like. And I think that will bring a lot of value to our universities, so that our level of teaching really simulates or closer to reality. By the time the people you're producing have a closer feel of the field they're moving into. So there's opportunity to have a framework of how we onboard universities and the optimal value that they can actually be able to get out of this framework. And or even how do we mainstream them in terms of their participation on annual conferences like this. And I will actually see that we'll also actually be able to strengthen even collaboration with quite a number of governments. If there are various governments that are participating with their universities, even a lot of policy pronouncement, the linkage between industry and academia through this particular platform again, I see that will actually be able to be narrowed. Also, there is the issue of internships. Probably through that particular platform, and I know you'll be getting a lot of practitioners in this field, it will be a closer nexus for students, for universities to actually be able to be getting opportunity for internship and attachment. So also there's a thought that could be able to be amplified and packed. And probably with the public service commissions, now that they're the hiring agencies, bodies, I know today, like the Kenya Public Service Commission is actually manage the internships program for the country. But now specifically for people in this particular area, you actually see how can you be able to inform a bit of thought leadership around that in their structuring and the actual execution. So I also see an opportunity there. Thank you.
Okay. With regards to the university partnerships, I think as IRSK, we've already approached quite a number of universities. And I think maybe Dr. Julian has been to one of the visits. Maybe he can just provide some context to that.
Yeah, thank you, Masai. On universities, I can confirm that we have started conversations, and one of the universities we are working with currently, in terms of just agreeing on the context of our relationship, is Daystar. The faculty of IR in Daystar has taken an interest on what IRSK is doing, given the huge portfolio of practitioners within our space, and for which they can also benefit, given that they are more on the scholarly side of life than what actually happens on the ground. We are at an advanced stage of agreeing an MOU, and it captures variety of things. It includes questions of internship, coaching and mentorship. We're even discussing curriculum development just to see the relevance of what is being churned out in the universities in the real world. I think we should be able to give you a firmer report on where we are on that engagement before the end of the year, but it looks very, very promising. We're also convinced that once this goes through and we showcase it to the rest of the universities, then it will be a downhill task. Yeah, but we will be very, very strategic in who we want to work with, because we also don't want to be spread thin. Yeah, I hope that answers your question. Okay, thank you very much.
And I think one of the unfortunate or one of the things that we realize is that universities are also quite bureaucratic, to be honest. So even for this conference, quite a number of universities that, including where I studied, I will not say the name, including where I did my IR, did not even acknowledge the invite for the call for paper. So universities can be bureaucratic. They have their own also issues. So we're trying to see how to bring them on board. But our conference chair is he teaches at a local university. I teach at a local university. So I think it's just a process of engaging. And maybe once we're able to get understand the intricacies of how to get this done within universities, I think we'll have a more structured dialogue and even perhaps better partnerships, so to speak. So I think that addresses that question or particular issue. Was there another hand? Yes, Dr. Ziso is raising his hand.
Thank you, Dr. Mwencha. Just briefly, I'm just thinking of what we can probably call a forgotten group. I think we should also keep in mind that we have got students that are in the diaspora who are studying IR, who are studying diplomacy, and they are engaged in massive researches that are very, very relevant for Africa and for COMESA in particular. Now, these students, once they produce their thesis or dissertations out there, some of them feel very lost because they do not get appreciated where they are producing these researches. Take, for example, in Australia. Australia is not very Africa-focused. So if a student from the COMESA region engages in African-focused research, it may be brilliant, but it just ends up being shelved in the archives, and then nothing happens to it. So I'm just thinking around probably doing more to market the association, so that these students are aware that they can contribute from wherever they are. But I think the diaspora will play a critical role going forward. Some of them are really able to even come and attend conferences because of the funding that is available from their institutions if they apply on time. And I think we should harness our students in the diaspora, even though they may not be in the African continent, geographically speaking.
Thank you for that very important note. And I think, again, I'd like to thank COMESA, who facilitated Dr. Claire to attend this conference all the way from Russia. So I think for us, as diaspora linkages are most welcome, and we're looking to see how to build that up and make it something that we like it's part and parcel of what we do. So perhaps that's a conversation we can have after this, including how to make this a COMESA-wide thing and not just a Kenyan thing. Yeah, thank you very much. I think we've addressed most of the issues or all the issues, and in the interest of time, I would like to hand my mic back to the podium back to Dr. Julian, so that we can go into the closing ceremony. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Dr. Mwencha. Dr. Mwencha, clearly we are very ambitious, and that's really, really exciting. We're coming to a close, but we can only do ourselves good just giving a moment for partners to give us their final remarks. I know they'll be, but Dr. Andre, we can't let you go without saying a few words in closing. Just be brief, but yeah, just take a break.
Dr. Ro, I know when I see you, I need to be brief. I need time. But I think I would just like to take this opportunity to congratulate the IRSK on an excellent inaugural conference. So please, ladies and gentlemen. I think you've really set the tone and the standard for future engagements, and have really fostered a very important space within which to share ideas and knowledge and experience. On behalf of Accord, I would like to thank you for the opportunity to have launched our monograph, and also to the authors, Prof. Apuli, Dr. Tiang, Dr. Sabala, for joining us, and Dr. Odegie, who joined us online. I hope that you all found it interesting. I think an indication that we have an empty box and no more monographs is a good thing. And thank you to PIDA for lugging it all the way from South Africa. We would also like to thank the partners, COMESA, Madam Mutunga. We always value our engagement with COMESA. And then specifically and personally, I'd like to thank Dr. Oita from COMESA, Dr. Sabala as head of the technical committee of the conference, Dr. Roa, and Dr. Mwensha, who's been running around in the background this whole time, but also who whooped us together every Wednesday morning for the past 6 months to plan this conference. I actually don't know what I'm going to do with myself this Wednesday morning. I'll really miss our conversations. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we can all agree that the past few days has been time well spent. Personally, it has been a really fruitful 2.5 days of debate, reflection, and inspiration. I think we can leave here with a better understanding of the challenges that lay ahead, and the work that needs to be done by each and every one of us in the room. So thank you.
A big round of applause for Andre. I did just a lot more than just supporting the conference. Accord yesterday saved a life through PIDA. PIDA, yesterday I was choking from tea going the wrong way. And Fahida struck me so hard on the back that everything came back to normal. Thank you, Fahida. Nice meeting you. Sorry about the Kenyan experience at the airport. Yeah, but that was pleasant. But I hope behind that, right? Okay. It can't end without having COMESA say a word. Dr. Aita, my friend, your final remarks. Thank you very much.
It's always very difficult to talk when your boss is there. So I was looking at her and saying, Elizabeth, this is your chance. And he said, no, you sit there. On behalf of COMESA, I really want to thank the partners, Accord. We are always working closely with Accord, and it's always very seamless. IRSK, under the leadership of Mwensha, Dr. Sabala, I think this has been very good. We started this discussion, I think, 6 months ago, but here we are. And I think if we work together, we can go far. Actually, they say that we either swim together or we drown separately. The issues are mammoth. The challenges are big, but we can only achieve this if we work together. And one thing that Elizabeth has always emphasized on the COMESA side is partnership, partnership, partnership. Because through partnership, we leverage on the limited resources that we have. We also leverage on the technical expertise that each one of us brings on board. And let's continue with this conversation. Let's continue with this partnership. And to the young people in the room, I was once a young man. Always remember,
that whatever your mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve. Thank you.
A big round of applause, Dr. Ita. Thank you so much, Dr. Ita. Thank you for all the support and for trusting us with this process. And finally, I'd like to invite Dr. Kizito to give us a vote of thanks. Under your very able leadership, we've been able to accomplish so much. So let me first thank you for that job very well done. A big hand to him, please. It's difficult to lead leaders, but you did an amazing job of it. So it's all yours now. Vote of thanks.
Thank you, and let me add my voice to thanking our partners, Accord and COMESA, and ourselves for putting this together. On behalf of the organizing committees, which includes the finance committee. I think where you are, you can just wave if you are there. Anybody from the finance committee? From the logistics committee, if you are there, just wave, please. We really appreciate. You can just stand, we see you. Yeah. Those are the men and women who have been behind this, and we really appreciate all your time, your sacrifices, and every effort that you made to make this a success. I want also to appreciate those guys moving around with the cameras and so on. They've done a tremendous job. Can we give them a clap? Sila for excellent artwork. You guys can see. The guys who are just making sure that all this is recorded so that we have a proper record of this inaugural conference. We appreciate you. Our able senior moderator, Julian Roa. A clap for him. Very calm, very competent, and just driving us to the next level and so on. Thank you so much. Yeah. The media guys who are here, led by Dismas Makua, we want to appreciate you. A clap for Dismas. Other guests who came in the Absendia, I just want to say thank you from the day one up to today. We have had visitors, participants coming in, and we want to appreciate them in Absentia. Finally, as you travel back, before that, I want to appreciate a very, very important constituents of these participants, our students. Let's give them a hearty clap. And I also want to encourage that as a society, we take deliberate efforts just to make sure that you get this platform. And as it was said over and over again, grab it and run away with it. It's a rare opportunity that you should not take it for granted. And we are here to assist, to respond to your questions, and to mentor you guys, ladies and gentlemen, so that as we exit this floor, We want to see new dancers from Zimbabwe, from Zambia, from Kenya, from Egypt, and so on and so on. Thank you so much and feel appreciated. The final word is, I'm very sure a number of you have asked how to join the society. I think we are going to share the details, and I really want to encourage you to become members of the society. There are a number of benefits, there are a number of very appropriate programs coming up, and I think they will interest you. And one of them is the one we had on the first day, Women in Diplomacy and International Affairs. That's a program that is almost being muted, and I think our next great event is likely to be on this as we agonize around conceptualizing and making an event out of that interesting idea. So please feel appreciated, and as you travel back, we want to wish those who are going to Australia, Russia, Uganda, Zambia, Zimbabwe, Kenya, because I'm very sure nobody is going to remain here. So even you, please get to your places safely. Let us keep in touch, and may God bless you all. Thank you.
Yeah, so 3 things very quickly before we wind up. Lunch is served on this side of my hand. Did I get that right? Yeah, that note I think is a bit misleading. It's on this other side, but we can correct that in a minute. So pursuant to this, you're invited to have lunch. I'm not releasing as yet. Photographer, our key photographer. No, first, before that, can we have a picture? Have about 3 of those, then we can do the general picture. First, the guys here, then I'll invite somebody else and another team, and we are done. In 2-3 minutes, we should be finished.
For those interested to join the society, of course you can see me. Those interested to join International Relations Society of Kenya, I'm here for you. Thank you.